At present era, Maoism is a threat to the whole world, including India. It is engaged in destabilizing India internally for the last 5 decades. To understand all aspects of Maoism, we have organized this special international webinar in association with Asian Eurasian Human Rights Forum on the platform of The Narrative. The Narrative is an independent media group with the objective of nation first, trying to create an India-centric discourse of all such topics. If you have any query related to the topic, then you can ask in the comment box of live video. Sri Yashodhanji is present among us as a moderator in today's program. Yashodhanji participates in voluntary capacity in the field of children's rights. He also academic interest in human rights in the digital age. I request Yashodhanji to make a brief comment on today's topic and introduce Asian Eurasian Human Rights Forum and our speaker for today's webinar. Yashodhanji.
So, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. And we are very pleased to have you for today's webinar. So, Asian Eurasian Human Rights Forum was founded in 1998 to espouse the principles of universal human rights at the United Nations Human Rights Commission. One of the objectives of the organization is to educate the global community about the acts of radical religious beliefs and its impact on the human rights. AEHRF, as it is abbreviated as an NGO, was registered in New Delhi, India, under Societies of Registration Act 1868 as a non-profit and charitable society. The purpose stated in the application of the registration was to project human rights and of internationally displaced people. AEHRF applied for its UN ECOSOC status, and in 2014, it got the ECOSOC status. AEHRF made various interventions in United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva and spoke about various human rights issues from academic as well as practical perspective. The list of human rights issues tackled by AEHRF since 1998 is wide, and our president is Professor K.N. Pandita, who has joined today's panel, and also we have Alok G. Bansal, who is General Secretary of the organization, but I'll be introducing them formally during our panel session. Today, we are very pleased to have Dr. Anshuman Beheraji, who is an academic from Bangalore, who has expertise in the topic today which we are dealing. And Anshuman Beheraji has done his PhD in this particular topic of Maoism, and he has been continuously working in this particular domain. His research interests are in conflicts and radicalization. He has authored several journal papers on these issues of conflict resolution and peace research. He works in National Institute of Advanced Studies. So without taking much of your time, I will request Dr. Anshuman Beheraji to please give his intervention. We are very pleased to have Anshumanji with us. He has written quite a lot of high impact journal papers, as well as a really good book, and we'll be talking about some of his research at the end of the presentation so that you can benefit from the literature which he has written. But before that, we will directly go to the topic, and I request Dr. Anshumanji to talk about this particular issue at hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yashodhanji. Before I start, I'll request you, can you see my screen visible? Hello?
Yes. We can see you, but your slides are not yet presented.
Okay, let me then see this, how to sort of share screen. Can you see the slide now?
No, not yet. Now, yes. Now we can see your slides, sir. Yes, absolutely. Now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yashodhan ji. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I would like to thank Asian Eurasian Human Rights Forum and the narrative, especially to you and Satish ji, for giving me an opportunity to speak on a topic that is very, very close to my research and to my kind of, exploration, understanding the kind of threats, not only to the state, but to the human right and to the specific section of our society it actually poses. So as you have asked me to speak on Maoism in Asian perspective and the human rights situation, what I have done is I have taken three important, I call them Maoism or the militant communism, three important case studies. So I'll offer a kind of brief introduction to the kind of militant communism that we experienced in Bangladesh, then in Nepal. Then I'll straightforward come to the Indian experience, and my major focus will be on the Indian experience and drawing my kind of experiences from the Indian experience. So I'll offer a set of challenges that this particular militant communism or the Maoist movement actually pose to the human right issues to a specific section of our society. So this is the broad structure of my presentation. First, as I said, I'll offer an introduction to the Maoism in South Asia. Then the entire focus will be on the dynamics of Maoism in India. Then there will be a focus on the urban movement plan. Okay, this has actually created a lot of kind of interest among the people, where the state has unnecessarily and very unfairly been blamed of targeting the so-called civil society organizations, and who, without any remorse, without any kind of secret thing with this, they support in furthering the Maoist movement in the urban areas. Then I'll come to the issues and the stakeholders. Then at the last, I'll offer certain human rights situations. Let me bring you to the Maoist in Asia. I only confine to the South Asia here. If you see, one commonality of this Bangladesh, Nepal, and India, the rise of militant communism was around the same time. The time was around 1966-67. When you had the group of people in the Naxalbari area started an organized way of attacking the local feudals and the zamindars and all these people, what they call for their entitlement and the rights. But then that was the time which actually influenced the communist in the East Pakistan and the Nepal that time. They also took up arm in fighting what they call for justice. So then when I come to Bangladesh had a very interesting episode of militant communism. So they had this communist movement which was under the flagship of Bangladesh Communist Party, BCP. By 1968, you would see there was a breakaway faction that is called the Purba Banglar Communist Party. And this is a militant communist organization which believed, or which actually got the ideological influence from the Naxalbari movement in India. And they wanted to fight the Islamists in Bangladesh. That is one. And the second, the feudalism, what they said, the feudals of Bangladesh. Okay, that is where you see that then the PBCP, the Purba Banglar Communist Party, actually got divided into two factions. One was the Janajuddha. Now that is what you saw, the People's War, what we say in India and Nepal. And then there was this red flag. This particular organization was basically active in Jessore and Khulna. What was the strategic importance of this was that both these districts were actually, sharing border with West Bengal, which had the kind of this influence of Naxalbari movement. So, but then, with the coming of the Khalida Zia to power in BNP, there was this organization. Many people believe that this Jagrata Muslim Janata Bangladesh, JMJB, was actually created to get rid of this PBCP. Now, as the PBCP was actually attacking, militarily both the IAMI League and the Khalida Zia's BNP, both these groups actually were targeting this PBCP kind of the militant organization to be completely wiped off from Bangladesh. So by 2009-10, you would see that the PBCP was completely, destroyed, and you don't find actually any of this militant communism active in Bangladesh. What was interesting to see that it more than the state action against a militant communism, you had a counter-Islamist militant group was actually created, JMJB, and later on the Jamatul Mujahideen Bangladesh, that was taking on this PBCP kind of thing. And what you see interesting in Bangladesh was there was one extremist group, guided by the religious extremism or the religious kind of militancy, was actually targeting a communist or militant communist ideological faction, and that is where with the support of these people like Jamaati Islami Bangladesh or the BNP, this PBCP, and later on by Sheikh Hasina's IAMI League, when it came to power in 2009, the PBCP was completely wiped out in Bangladesh. The Nepal experience offers very, very interesting. This was a movement that started, if you get into the history, it was in 1971, in a district called Jhapa. And popularly in Nepal, it's called the Jhapali movement. It was also influenced by the Indian Naxalbari movement, and that was the first kind of militant communism that we experienced. But the most organized and the most kind of dangerous way of fighting what they call for justice and all that was organized in 1996. I'll not take much time on that thing, but then there was a 40-point demand, which was given to the elected government. Sher Bahadur Dubey was the prime minister at that time. Of course, there are three major demands of the Nepal Maoist. One, there was the end of monarchy. And then, as you all know, that Nepal has a wonderful history of political instability. They also and most of these people, they feel that the root cause of this political instability was there was no legitimate or a credible kind of constitution written for Nepal. So the next demand by the Maoist was there has to be a constitutional committee, constituent assembly, which would write the constitution, and the third is to establish Nepal as a democratic secular republic kind of thing. Okay, so that is where you see the Nepal Communist Party or the Unified Communist Party of Nepal. Many people claim that it was the factor which brought down the monarchy in Nepal. Okay, this can be contested. One can contest it. Okay, because the king or the monarchy was itself responsible in many ways, for its own kind of debacle. So by 1996, this movement actually started. It was one of the most bloodiest kind of militant communism that we have witnessed in South Asia. Out of 75 districts, it had the control, except Kathmandu. It had virtually, it was not virtually, but it had complete control over all the districts, starting from the Tarai to the hills of Nepal. And by 2006, there was a peace agreement, what we call the 7-party alliance, and that is where the Nepal communists actually laid down their arms. And now what we see that the Maoist of Nepal was actually mainstreamed. Okay, they also came to power at this point of time. What you see that the Nepal Communist Party is virtually it has withered away. If you put it in a Marxist term, to the extent that in a 275 strong member strong kind of parliament, they are reduced to 49 members. Okay, and there is a lot of factionalism among these people. Then we come to the Communist Party of India, the Maoist. Okay, this is one of the the focus of our discussion today, and it has a history of last for 58, 60 years. Starting from a lot of people go back to 1948. Okay, the Tibhaga movement in West Bengal, or the fighting against the in northern Telangana. But the first organized kind of thing you see in 1967 in the Naxalbari movement. We'll come to this thing, but if you see the commonality among these three militant communism or the Maoist movements in South Asia, they all derived, or they all kind of got influenced by something called what the Mao actually told how to run a particular movement to establish a new democratic order. Okay, so the new democracy is something very, 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 very close to the Maoist thing, but they fail to sort of define what exactly it is. Okay, we'll come to that. Now, three magic weapons to run this particular movement: there has to be a party, there has to be an army, then there has to be a Revolutionary United Front, and this is something the Revolutionary United Front will come later. And the 3 pages, one is that has to be, there is to organize or to set up the organization, and this organization has to follow a Leninist model of highly centralized and disciplined kind of party. Then you have once this organization is actually set up and it is run by a particular party, this will also have the guerrilla warfare. Then it will lead to the mobile warfare. If you see the Maoist in South Asia, Bangladesh, Nepal, and India, to some extent, the Nepal Maoist party was able to march up to the mobile warfare stage. Okay, both Bangladesh and India. Okay, India is yet to get into the mobile warfare phase, and given the strength of Indian state, it is highly difficult. Maybe one can say it is impossible that the Indian Maoism will ever graduate to the mobile warfare phase. And coming to the Maoist in India, it started after the merger in 2004. Okay, by 2011 and 12, you have the Maoist presence, okay, moderate, high, and extreme in 10 states with 188 districts. But then now if you come down, you will find 81 critically affected districts. And this is the map for you. Okay, the red patches, what you see, these are the extremely affected area, and this is the area where Maharashtra, Telangana, Odisha, and Chhattisgarh sort of, this is the belt where they are very, very active. And the Siliguri movement that I was discussing with Satishji, this is where the Maoists have their presence, and this is a strategic location. Otherwise, if you see, most of the areas the Maoists have either lost their kind of control over the people, or they have not been able to garner their support from the people, or the security forces have completely wiped them out. Okay, coming to the dynamics of the left-wing extremism, this is what the official name of the Maoist thing in India. When you see their ideology, this ideology is very bookish in nature. Okay, you see that that documents, if you read, this is as usual, very age-old kind of things. They say that they follow Marxist, Leninist, and Maoist ideas of revolution. But academics, they said that the Marxist, Leninist to Maoist, there is no continuity. There is a lot of kind of contradictions. This thing. But then this is a wonderful phrase which actually brings a lot of kind of attention, or it is glorified to the extent that it catches the imagination of the people that it is a Marxist, Leninist, Maoist ideas of revolution. And that is where they say the protracted people's war to seize political power. What it signifies is that the Maoists are not in a hurry. That is what, some of the, my experience, I would say some of the Maoist camps, they would say that we are not in a hurry state and to fight against the injustice. Okay, and there is, theoretically they say they're fighting contradictions, the contradictions between the rich and the poor, the contradictions of the mass and the elite. These are some kind of theoretical things they actually offer. But the real danger comes when they actually start delegitimizing or rejecting the the idea of democracy in the Indian state. They said that the levels of democracy or the parliamentary form of governance that India follows is absolutely sham, and it is based on the semi-feudal and the semi-colonial nature. And now why do they call the semi-feudal? Because they see that the entire level of political governance that we have, it is run by the feudal, and it is semi-colonial because we are not free from any sort of kind of foreign invasion or the foreign control. We are still controlled by those colonial mindset. Okay, and they say the parliament or the democratic nature of governance that we have is actually an instrument of exploitation of the marginalized people. Okay, so that is where what is the way out for them? So they say there is a revolutionary objective for which they have taken up arms. Okay, and through this revolution, they want to establish a classless society. And this is something that is a very, very Marxian way of actually putting things, a classless society, but they fail to define what a classless society would be. Okay, and then the second thing is that the establishment of new democratic order. And this is something very confusing, that you have a well-established kind of a democracy. It's recognized worldwide that this democracy has never failed, okay, for last 70 odd years. But then the new democratic order is also ill-defined in the Maoist thing.